Hey y'all, it's Nick from Undefeated Productions, and welcome to the 3-2 Pitch, our podcast where me and Drew are actually going out and covering the season and what's happened thus far, kind of giving you an update now that we are a third of the way through the season for a majority of the teams throughout the league, which is already crazy to think that baseball is a third of the way done. And I don't know how we've gotten to this point already. It feels like now that we've had baseball back, this third has gone by in about 2 days. So time is really flying now that we have America's Pastime back with us again. So first off, Drew, how you doing? It's been a while.
I'm doing fine. I'm busy. I'm trying to open up a school here. But other than that, I've been watching baseball, and I really have enjoyed it. I've been watching my team, the Giants, suck because they do suck. They got off to a decent start, actually. But, Gabe Kapler and his, taking out really great pitchers when they only have 70 pitches thrown in the sixth inning, when they're throwing 98 miles an hour. I'm talking about what Kevin Gausman was doing against the Dodgers a few weeks ago. But overall, I've been really excited to watch baseball again. Nick, you and I are both avid MLB.TV users. But I've been watching games. I watched the Dodgers and the Padres last night. I saw Mookie hit 3 homers. I watched the Marlins and the Blue Jays the other night in a classic 14-11 in Buffalo, New York, at a minor league stadium. What a series that was. The ball was just flying out of the ballpark. Oh, my goodness. And I got a chance to see the Marlins, who are really an early surprise, one of our early surprise teams that we'll talk about, although they haven't played enough games to really qualify for, to play a third of a season yet. But really interesting story there. And it's just been great to watch baseball again. And I have to be honest with you, I have not really gotten into the NBA yet. I've watched a little bit of the NHL, but the NBA has not been exciting for me, and I know their playoffs are starting this week. But baseball has been great. I feel like it is as much as I sort of dog them for starting the season the way they did. I think they've done a great job with the stadiums. I think they've done a great job with the crowd noise in the background, making it somewhat tolerable to watch the game or listen on the radio. And the ball is flying out of the yard. The ball is just flying, and it's fun to watch, frankly. So I'm excited. Obviously, there's been some news out of a few of the cities here, or a few of the teams that haven't exactly followed the rules and have been exposed in that way. And Major League Baseball is going to have a tough time figuring out what to do with those teams, how to get them to play the games that they've missed and figure out a way to get the postseason going, because there might be some extra games that are tacked on, or they're going to have to tack on more of those 7-inning doubleheaders.
Yeah, so as you're saying, the season has been, just kind of all over the place so far in terms of, teams getting exposed, the new rules, the doubleheader extra inning rule, and, tons of different things. So, we're here today. We're going to highlight a bunch of things that have happened within the first third of the season. And next week, we'll hopefully bring you guys another show where we'll be tagging along one of my ideas, not confirmed, but we'll be talking about surprise players and, disappointing players. Because this week, one of the things we will be talking about is surprise teams and disappointing teams. So we're going to kind of keep on that trend, talk about players next week. So we're going to try to bring that to you next week. But first off, we're going to talk about kind of the bigger news. I want to hear, Drew's opinions on this, and I'll be kind of giving out what I have. So going a little off on what he said, but first off, I want to talk about the brawls of the Ramon Laureano brawl, and the suspension to Laureano, the Astros coach, and the Joe Kelly incident. Kind of just talk about this all in one. So what are your thoughts on that kind of in situation, because it's all against the Astros?
First of all, shame on Alex Cintron, the hitting coach for the Astros. Just a complete moron, an absolute moron. And for him, a grown man, we're talking about an older gentleman here. I don't know how old he is. I don't respect him enough to even look him up. But he was egging Laureano on and apparently cussing at him in Spanish going down the line. I know we talk about Jam Boys, the other YouTube page where they really focus on the intricacies of a brawl, and he sort of goes in depth on the details. We don't do that on this show, but he egged him on, and he was swearing at him in Spanish and apparently some really bad language, offensive to his family. So I don't blame Laureano one bit. Laureano was hot. He had just been hit by 2 pitches, and I don't care if it's a slider. I know he was talking about how, he didn't move it. He didn't break the ball. He didn't move his wrist, flick his wrist to make it slide, and that's why the ball just went straight into his shoulder. But I don't blame Laureano one bit. He probably regrets charging the dugout. His suspension did get reduced today down to 4 games. I don't know if you saw that,
Yep.
but that's good news for the A's because he is a hell of a player, defensively and offensively. Just another scar on the Houston Astros, who, by the way, one of the disappointing teams we'll talk about, off to a terrible start. They just continue to pile up on themselves and really make life difficult for their reputation as an organization moving forward. But otherwise, the Joe Kelly situation, again, he took it too far, in my opinion, because when you start throwing at people's heads, that's where you could kill somebody. And it's still a game. It's still baseball. And then it wasn't a very good look for him to mock, as he was walking off the mound like that, sort of like a child. But again, this is, it's kind of like you reap what you sow. And the Astros, they put themselves in this situation. I think the suspension for Kelly was definitely warranted. But it's another – we talked about how the Astros they almost got off the hook because of the COVID-19 situation. Again, this is sort of, a wake-up call for them that they are going to have to deal with this for a long time, and people aren't going to forget. And it's to me, it's not a surprise. It's kind of irony that the Red Sox and the Astros are both struggling this year. The Red Sox are really struggling. But the Astros are also struggling in their division. They're not going to catch Oakland. They may not even be able to keep up with Texas, the way Texas looks and the potential they have. The Angels, while they suck, at least in the standings, they've got some talent on that team. They just need to get their pitching in order. But I'm not surprised that this has happened to the Astros, and I feel like the suspensions are definitely warranted. I'm glad that the Laureano suspension got reduced.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Ramon Laureano incident, it's kind of, suggested. He got hit 3 times, I believe it was, that series. And then with Cintrone, I did look, he was 41 years old, so younger than most hitting coaches in the league. But, just things that they're saying, I don't blame him for wanting to charge at him. It's just like in Spanish, I'm taking Spanish in school, and they take things that are said, much more personally there. And it's part of, what's taken throughout cultures. So considering what my standpoint here is, I respect his decision. Cintrone probably should not have done that. Ramon, if it was me, maybe I wouldn't have. But, with the cultural influences and stuff like that, I could see exactly why he did that. And overall, him getting hit, just retaliation, he's over it, and it's the Astros. So, I mean, what do you want to do? So, and with the Joe Kelly incident, I knew it was a matter of time until something like that happened. As John Boy, as we're talking about it, I believe he made a shirt with Joe Kelly, just like the pouting face. And I thought that was kind of funny. But, Joe Kelly, they're talking about suspensions reduced and stuff like that. Why punish him when, the Astros got away with cheating and everything? So, his suspension did get reduced too. I believe he's on the injured list right now. But overall, Joe Kelly, it was a matter of time until it happened. Throwing at the head, that's a little iffy. Probably shouldn't be doing that. As a baseball player, we talk about head injuries so much. And, it's just one of those things that, like I said, it was bound to happen. And I think Joe Kelly is quite soothing to, be the one who does it, as he's always had, that kind of like attitude out there on the mound that really, he just really doesn't care what he does. So the other thing we want to talk about is the coronavirus and what impacts it has made to teams like the Cardinals, teams like the surprise Miami Marlins, and also the restrictions that it's put on like players like Zach Plesac and Mike Clevenger, who both were in a party in Chicago and got sent back to Cleveland to, go quarantine for 3 days until they produced 3 negative tests. So quickly, and without players in general just testing positive, how do you think this is going? How do you think MLB's handled this situation? Do you think there needs to be change? What do you think about this?
They haven't handled it great, I don't think. And Rob Manfred is constantly going back and forth, between in the beginning of the season talking about how they were close to canceling or, stopping the season that first week where they had the outbreak in the Marlins clubhouse / Philadelphia, that series that was in Philadelphia between the Marlins and the Phillies. And then he came out and said, you know what, it's, we're moving forward. They're going to have to make up the games. And I think that probably because of money, they really don't want to stop the season. And I don't want them to either. I mean, I really, baseball has really given me such a stress relief over the last month, that it started. Well, it's not even a month yet, but it feels like it's been going now. And it really helps with being able to come home and watch a game on TV and just, relax and enjoy the game that we all love. But shame on the Marlins players. They were the ones that got this started when it was actually it was a summer training game in Atlanta where they went out. And shame on Plesac and shame on Clevenger and shame on the Cardinals for going to a casino. It's not a good look. The other leagues, while they have bubbles, they've stayed coronavirus free. And I just don't understand how Major League Baseball didn't come up with a more stringent plan to make sure that something like this, that there were expectations and rules involved and what players could do and what they couldn't do, and that there was some sort of a contract breach or something that they could have included to make them held more accountable for themselves. But it's obviously going to have an impact on the season because, again, like I mentioned, those teams are going to have to make up those games. And but it is a fluid situation. Unfortunately for those teams, it's going to really cause some inconvenience. But, the Giants, my team, they've been great. They've the Mets, they've been great. They've played all their game. Well, they haven't been great on the field, but they've been great as far as, coronavirus goes. And that's really half the battle. And I think it comes down to leadership. I think it comes down to, the managers and how they run their sort of, clubhouse and the general managers and the organization. If these teams continue to, slip up like this, it might take one more outbreak and that might be it. Because now you have 3 or 4 teams that have to make up all those games. It might be manageable now. But, Major League Baseball has done a pretty good job of sort of, getting through this, at least to this point, and continuing to allow the rest of the league to play. So I hope they're able to get through this season. Again, this is always going to be, to me, it's always going to be an asterisk of a season. If the Dodgers win the World Series, which I expect them to win based on their talent level and their offense, they will always be an asterisk, winner. They're never going to be – they'll never be able to be like, a team that won a real championship in a real season. This is not a real season. This is a condensed, modified, there's no fans. All of that plays a role, less pressure. I want them to win because, again, I can always say that they were the 2020 World Series champions, coronavirus asterisk.
Yeah, so, my whole thoughts on this entire thing, Miami, it was bound to happen, an outbreak throughout, like I said, with the Joe Kelly incident. Before the season even started, like the first series of the year, that's what surprised me a little bit. And then, like, the Cardinals, like, what the heck are you doing? A casino, their season is going to resume tomorrow, Saturday. They've only played 5 games this season. They didn't even get a 6th game, and other teams like the Mets, the Braves, they've played 20 games. They're behind 15 games. Of course, Clevenger, Plesac, these players need to have some more integrity. They need to take it, self-discipline. They need to take it upon themselves to, stay safe. They just don't really care about what's happening here. They don't really care about it. They just, if they want to play, they should take the precautions needed. If they don't want to play, then they should expect to be sent home like Clevenger and Plesac did, and even get a team suspension where they can't play, for some more time. Disciplining them, saying, "Hey, this is a serious thing. We want to play baseball. If you don't want to play baseball, then you can just opt out and have no pay." This is my whole thought on that. And then with the Cardinals, playing only 5 games, one last things before we start getting into the juicy stuff of the surprising teams is, what are your thoughts on these, speeding up rules we have? The extra inning rule where you start a runner on second base, and of course these 7-inning doubleheaders. What is your take on these? As these games, these rules have come into play multiple times, and with the Cardinals season starting up tomorrow, they're going to be playing a doubleheader against the Cubs. What are your thoughts on these?
I'm indifferent, to be honest. I'm not. Everyone's been getting worked up over the extra inning rule. I don't care. Again, I'm just happy, as I mentioned, months ago when we started doing these shows. I'm happy there's baseball, and that's enough for me. But the fact that people get so worked up about it, I think they're old-fashioned. I think they're so used to a game maybe going to 18 innings and loving that. I never really liked that, to be honest. I remember I was at an 18-inning game a couple of years ago. It was the Giants and the Reds. It was a Friday night, and Buster Posey actually hit a home run to win the game. I don't know if you remember that game.
I do.
There was nobody there. We had moved all the way down to the lower box seats, but I mean, it was like 1 a.m, and they were still playing, and it was just like the seagulls were infesting the stadium, which they do at Oracle Park. I'm okay with it because these games go long enough anyway. The average game, even with these rule changes, the average game is still way too long. You rarely see a 2-hour game anymore. Usually it's at least 2.5 to 3 hours. And because the ball's flying out of the yard, I mean, that 14-11 game the other day, on Wednesday, or I think it was Tuesday, the Marlins and the Blue Jays, oh my God. That game was insane. And it was like 3.5 hours, and it's enough. So by the time you get to extra innings, I'm okay with it. And I haven't seen a distinct advantage for either the home team or the away team. I know the away team gets to hit first, and they get a chance, but then there was that game in Houston with the Dodgers and the Astros that neither team scored for a few innings, even with the runner at second. So if you have great pitching, that's an advantage, and to me, that makes you a better team anyway. So if your bullpen's better, you probably deserve to win. So I'm okay with that rule. As far as the 3 hitters rule, I think that's great. I like the idea that pitchers that managers can't pull a guy after one batter. That just to me that always kind of bothered me. And now it means that relievers have to be able to get out righties and lefties, which is important. Overall, I'm fine with the rule changes. The one thing that I wanted to mention is I don't know if you've noticed this, but the umpires have been awful behind the plate.
Oh yeah. Oh,
they've got to get the robotic strike zone. They've got to do it. It's time. To me, this would have been a great time to experiment with it. They are missing so many blatant strikes and balls, and it's affecting games. It's affecting people's livelihoods, their jobs, managers' jobs, and it doesn't have to be that way anymore. We have the technology. Replay has gotten a lot smoother now. It's a lot faster. I've noticed that it's streamlined, so you're not seeing those long wait times to get the calls. But they've got to get this robotic strike zone. They've got to do it.
Yeah. So for me, the extra inning rule, as I like it, just brings in it adds fun and like this interesting feel towards the end of the game. And for me personally, I feel like I'm going to be different with you. I feel like it gives a great advantage to the away team because momentum is such a huge thing in baseball. We watched the Braves go out. They scored 3 runs. The Mets, they couldn't even – I think they brought 1 across maybe in a game earlier on in the season. But it seems to me that away teams have a much greater chance of bringing a run across first, and that run across really just kind of puts the home team down. It's hard to come back when you already gave up runs in the prior inning. It's just kind of statistically based. Momentum is a big factor, And, that's one of the things I dislike about this rule is just the momentum. It doesn't give kind of a fair chance unless your team does, have a great bullpen. And, they can be, even with a great bullpen, you can have players still shaky. Every player is vulnerable. Seth Lugo, probably one of the top 10 relief pitchers right now for the Mets or across baseball even. He gave up a couple runs against the Braves in Atlanta one day. So, everyone's vulnerable. So even with your best relief pitcher, Josh Hader out there, he can still give up runs. You give up that 2 runs in that inning, it's really going to kill the momentum. Personally, the 7-inning double headers, I kind of like that. Speeds up the time, saves arms. I'm a big thing about, getting more games in. If it takes 7 innings to get more games and get all 60 games in, have a bigger sample size, then I'm personally okay with that. If we get to the point where we're not playing all 60 games for each team, then that's be like, well, 7 innings, like what was that about, So again, those two rules hopefully, maybe get abolished after the season. They're more experimenting rules. And that's, like you said, with the robotic strikes, and I think now would be a perfect time to experiment with it. It's this season is so chaotic as is. I think experimenting with things is a great, great, great thing to do. And the 3-batter minimum, at first I don't really like it, but it's kind of grown on me. I kind of like, having it kind of like speeds up the game, adds more strategy. Okay, like you're actually looking at charts, and then you're adding players that can give out batters from both sides. So personally, I'm growing on that rule. And overall, this season, great season, test things. And if something doesn't work out, then, there's always next year to abolish it when hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be playing 162 games during the regular season. Now moving on to the actual juicy things about what we're talking about, what we promised everyone is the surprise and disappointing teams. And we're going to kind of like compare them and like the standings to what we had predicted originally. And, kind of saying like with the added playoff teams, because we haven't talked since they added these extra playoff teams, kind of like what this has brought in, what changes we need to make to our original things and what teams are added in, in general, just everything so far standing wise. And yeah, Drew, why don't you start us off here?
So I'm just going to go through my surprise teams for, the entire league. I'll just go across the board. I'm going to start with the Detroit Tigers. They're a great story because we talked about them earlier in our, a few months ago when we started doing this, and they have a lot of young players. It's a rebuild, but you know what? We also mentioned that when you talk about a shortened season like this, hey, anything can happen. You get off to a decent start, which they did. And now at a, with a 9-7 record, they're hitting the ball out of the ballpark. They're pitching. They have an old school manager in Ron Gardenhire, who I've always liked. And I think he's really doing a great job of, developing their young talent that they have. Now their schedule has been pretty easy, but, that's another thing. The schedules are different because these teams aren't playing out of their division. So when you look at the AL Central, it's not the best division in the world. Minnesota is good as I thought, but Cleveland and Chicago, they're right behind also. It's a very close division. It's the closest division that we have. Even Kansas City at 8-11 is only 4 games out. So that I would even take that a step further and say the AL Central has been a really surprising division. I'm not surprised with what's happened in the AL West. I love the A's. I continue to love the A's, and I think they're going to get to the ALCS. Do I think they'll get to the World Series? No. They're not going to get to the World Series because the Bronx Bombers, oh my God. Whew, God, they can hit. Not only can they hit, but they can pitch. And they are, to me, by far the most talented team in the American League. That doesn't mean that the Rays can't beat them, which, we'll talk about. And the Rays are not a surprise team. They're doing well also. But you got to talk about Baltimore. The Baltimore Orioles, another really interesting story of young talent coming together. I think the fact that no fans are in the seats, I think it helps them. Less pressure. Obviously, a nothing to lose attitude in the first place. But keep an eye on the Baltimore Orioles for one of those playoff spots because they are in it. A game and a half out of the division. But not only that, they've played well against the teams they were supposed to beat, like the Red Sox. They beat up on Boston, and that's big. The Blue Jays, they've had kind of an interesting season because they weren't sure where they were going to play, and they had some of their games postponed also. They don't have the pitching that they need, but man, do they have the offense. I love the Toronto Blue Jays offense. I don't think they're going to get in. I didn't think they would before the season, but hey, you never know. Going to the National League, Miami, they're the surprise team. They might be the surprise team of the entire league, of Major League Baseball. They're I think now they're starting to use this, COVID, what happened to them, as sort of a battle cry. I don't see it that way, but they are technically in first place in the division at 8-4. Atlanta will win the division. Don't get me wrong. And the Mets are. I'm going to put them in the disappointing category. I'm going to go ahead and say that I've got two other surprise teams, and the first one is Colorado. Colorado Rockies. They always could hit, but they have pitched. They've pitched. They've got some flamethrowers in their bullpen. Some guys that are 98 to 100, and then their starters have been decent. San Diego to me is not a surprise because I expected them to play well based on their talent level and their pitching, especially their bullpen. Chicago, man, are they good? And I don't want to toot my own horn, but somebody picked Chicago to win the division. And I think somebody else picked them to not even make the playoffs. I'll let you go from there.
Yeah, so I did not see Chicago. We're going to start off right with Chicago. I did not see Chicago's crazily old starting rotation with Kyle Hendricks, John Lester, Yu Darvish, all these guys over 30 years old pitching their brains out.
Almost a no-hitter last night?
Almost a no-hitter last night. Hendricks started off the season with a complete game shutout. I don't know what to say. This Chicago team is surprising me in every way. It's the pitching. I'm telling you, pitching wins games. Because you look at their offense, Chris Bryant's been struggling. Rizzo's been struggling. Ian Happ, yeah, he's been good. But, these star players, Bryant, Rizzo, Baez, you can even consider the iffy category. The hitters have been struggling, but their pitchers have been able to allow very, very, very few runs. The Chicago Cubs, man, they've been a huge surprise team. And if their pitching wins up, like I say, pitching wins games, they will make the playoffs. And at this point, it's hard to see them not making the playoffs. So, yes, I'll take it. I was wrong. But, man, I don't think it's – like I said, it's hard to project 30-something-year-old players, pitching their brains out. Next up, we're going to be going to back to the American League. We're going to just flip it up a little bit. And, a surprise team for me there is, like you said, Detroit. I think Detroit's a massive surprise team. Their lineup's been going crazy. They're putting the pieces together. One thing that stands out to me is Gregory Soto out of the bullpen. That dude is nasty. Along with Tyler Alexander, he struck out I think it was 12 players in a row or 9, something like that. He struck out a ton of players in a row. It was crazy to see that. He's been amazing. Gregory Soto, I picked him up on my fantasy team. He's been so good. Detroit, they've been putting the pieces together. One surprise for me within that team is Matthew Boyd being how horrendous he's been. He's allowed 7 runs and 4 2/3 inning both of the last 2 starts. So, he's been terrible. He can be credited with, a good chunk of the losses for Detroit. But overall, Detroit, another surprise team. And, keeping it with the rebuilding teams, the Baltimore Orioles, as you said, it's kind of easy to pinpoint these, surprise teams out there. The Orioles, they beat up on Boston. They beat up on Washington. They're beating up on all these, teams that are better than them. And surprisingly doing good for the teams in the NL East. I believe they swept Washington. They're 6 out of their last 4. They're on a 3-game win streak right now. They're plus 15 in run differential. The Baltimore Orioles, with a team with all prospects, they have probably no good names. Trey Mancini's out, so what? Jose Iglesias is their best hitter. Are plus 15 on run differential. That's saying a lot right there. So, the Orioles crazy good. And, who knows? They might make the playoffs. Who knows with Detroit too? You know, overall, Oakland, yeah, I project them to be good. Texas, they're a little bit surprising. Yes, they did lose Corey Kluber, which hurts a lot, but I predicted, Lance Lynn, he's stepping it up a bunch. Joey Gallo's starting to hit for a little more average. You know, we'll talk about surprise players. I almost let one slip right there, but talking about them next week, hopefully. The Miami Marlins, again, the Marlins are crazy. First place in the NL East. Now, again, they have been a little bit on a decline. They lost 2 out of 3 to the Mets, and they won their last contest. I believe it was against Atlanta. So Toronto, yes, Toronto. I forgot about that.
Remember the series? Remember the
Yep,
series I was
yep,
talking
yep,
about
yep.
in Buffalo?
It is showing up as their next game today is against Atlanta. I totally forgot they played Toronto. It tells you how much my brain's clocked in, ready for school next week. But anyways, again, Miami, another surprise team. They're beating up on some of these teams that are not very good. Philadelphia Phillies. They're even beating the good teams. I wouldn't expect them to go out and I would expect them to go out and win, 2 out of 3 from Atlanta here. I mean, they've just been on a roll. They've been just clicking in a different way. Their pitching has been strong right there. Again, pitching wins games. And then finally, the last surprise team is, like you said, the Colorado Rockies. Man, has their rotation been good, even for Coors Fielder out there. Herman Marquez, he was dominant. Kyle Freeland's been dominant out there. I mean, Jairo Diaz, he's been good. Yeah, they've had some disappointing pieces in their bullpen, but I mean, look at Charlie Blackmon out here. Okay, I know we're not talking about surprise players, but can we just get a little credit for him? He might hit over 400 this year. He was hitting like 500, going in at some point this week. Like, he has been crazy going off. He has been leading this team to where they're at right now. And if they're pitching, figures it out, they don't give up tons and tons of runs in Coors Field, which is, the hitter's best friend out there, they will be good and they will stay up at the top of the leaderboard for a while. I mean, they have the offense with it. Arenado, Story, Daniel Murphy's been doing good. Chuck Nasty out there. So overall, Colorado, a surprise team. And even you can even give a little props to San Diego. Fernando Tatis Jr. has been carrying that team. But overall, tons of surprise teams. And now for the, more disappointing teams out there, Got lots of disappointing teams. Who do you got, Drew?
Yeah, so this one, there's more disappointing teams than actually surprise teams this year. But I'm going to start in the National League on this one, and I'm going to start with Cincinnati. This was a team that shows how much you know. You thought they were going to get off to a good start, and I'm sorry, but they're the same old Reds to me. They're very inconsistent. They got off to a terrible start, which was really disappointing, because I felt like that was their only chance to compete. And now, being, a gazillion games behind the Cubs, I mean, it's only 6.5, but really you have to enhance that number because of a shortened season. So 6.5 back with only 40 to play. I mean, that's a lot of games to make up, and they're not going to make it up. So, and then, they're technically still behind St. Louis, who's only played a few games, but St. Louis is better. Milwaukee is also has struggled, but I didn't expect them to be good this year. So, I'm not surprised there. The team that I'm really, really, really disappointed in the National League is the Arizona Diamondbacks. Oh my God. They have been just horrendous, especially Madison Bumgarner. Oh God. It hurts me. It really pains me to see him literally. He literally looked like a pitching machine against San Diego last week. I think it was a few weeks ago. It was just literally just 86-mile-an-hour fastball right down the middle, one after another. It was like batting practice. He's actually gone on the injured list now, so they're probably trying to come up with an excuse for why his velocity is down. But, he's looked terrible, just awful. And that whole team in general is just very disappointing. I expected them to be not with the same record as the Giants. I mean, the Giants might end up having the worst record in baseball by the time this is over. I expect them to trade at least Cueto, maybe Samardzija. and maybe some of their some of their pieces. They might even trade Yastrzemski and some of their other surprising bats. Who knows? Somebody might want Donovan Solano.
Blue Jays, look out for Yastrzemski.
Thank you. But yeah, they've been a disappointment. And then last but not least in the National League is the Phillies. They're absolutely atrocious. And they're, a team that, Bryce Harper, I guess I'm not surprised because Bryce Harper, as we both know, never really has been a winner. He's been on a few playoff teams with Washington, but he just, I don't see him as a guy that's ever going to win a World Series. And I found it ironic last year that he left and the Nationals won the World Series. There's something to say about that, about team chemistry. Moving to the American League, the Astros, they're a huge disappointment, but in a way there's some merit behind why they've struggled, because of their pitching staff. Dusty Baker still is kind of, I wake up to nightmares of him, how he managed the bullpen when he was with the Giants all those years. And he still doesn't really know how to manage a bullpen, although he doesn't really know the guys that he has. Their bullpen, Houston's bullpen has changed quite a bit over the last few years. So, again, that's not necessarily his fault. But you got to go to Boston. They're probably the disappointment in baseball. Although it's not a surprise to me. I thought they would compete. I did say on this show that they would end up being around 500. That's not going to happen. They are just depleted. Alex Verdugo is their best player probably at this point, and that's not saying much. The pitching, the injuries that they've had, losing some of their starters, obviously for different reasons. It's been a disappointment. So Boston has been a huge disappointment. And I'm going to say this team again because they're always a disappointment every year, but it's the Angels. They just can't pitch. Whatever it is, they can hit the hell out of the ball. They scored a ton of runs in this last series against the A's, and they really should have swept them, but they only won 2 out of 3. But they constantly lose games, high-scoring games. They've got to figure it out at some point that if they could put a pitching staff around this lineup that they have. Trout is just on fire. Rendon is starting to heat up. They've got some young talent on their roster, especially in their lineup, but they just can't pitch. And if they learned how to pitch, or if their organization put more into their pitching staff, I think they would finally be able to get over the hump again. But the big disappointments for me are Boston, Houston, Philadelphia, the Reds, and Arizona. They're a huge disappointment for me.
Yeah, so before I talk about my disappointments, this came out literally while Drew was talking. The Cleveland Indians have optioned Zach Plesac and Mike Clevenger, who, again, both went out, partied at Chicago. Like I said, punishment is probably going to happen, and they optioned both of them. And that's going to kick me right into this disappointing teams. And honestly, the Indians, even for what all the hype up around them, I think they're probably a little off of what they are probably hyped up to be. They're sitting 4th place. Yeah, they're only 2 games back, but taking this blow, losing their two of their best pitchers out there. I know Carlos Carrasco's been pitching his brain out, but so is Zach Plesac. Losing him and Clevenger, 2 very solid arms out of that rotation for presumably at least 1 start, maybe 2. Depending on what Cleveland takes it, they're going to be declining a little bit. I know Jose Ramirez, he's been going crazy for them. But overall, I don't see much within them. And personally, I can see them as, like a disappointment. Same with the Red Sox. Massive disappointment there. Their lineup is not hitting whatsoever. Devers isn't hitting. Bogarts isn't doing the greatest. JD Martinez isn't. Mitch Moreland, he had a couple homer game recently. Jackie Bradley, he's been okay. Verdugo. Overall, their team is just not very good. I know Christian Vasquez, he blew up against the Mets for some reason. It's always against the Mets when you see guys blow up like that. But Again, the Red Sox probably, like you said, probably the biggest disappointment considering that, yeah, they could have still put together, but again, losing Eduardo Rodriguez, Chris Sale just shows how much, pitching wins games. If you don't have pitching, it doesn't get you anything. And the Angels also are a great showcase to that. I know Dylan Bundy, I was watching him. I wanted him on my fantasy team earlier this year. I had him as my watch before we redrafted our league this year, and he still fell one pick before me. But like I said, he has like an under 2 ERA. Big surprise moving out of Baltimore, but he's really the only players on that Angels staff that has been great. We have Shohei Ohtani, who again is injured again. He's still hitting. But, overall their lineup has been crazy. Trout, Rendon, David Fletcher's been going crazy. Otani's been starting to heat up a little bit with the bat. Overall their team has a very solid lineup out there. So it's just a matter, can a few more guys put it together in the rotation. But personally, I don't think Bundy has enough to carry it, especially with Shohei not really coming back this year. Another disappointing team that we can say is, Washington Nationals. I know you didn't highlight them. I know they've had a few games postponed. But, overall, they haven't looked very good. Scherzer's not looking good. Strasburg had his first start recently. Anibal, they just got blown out by the Mets 2 games in a row. Tomas Nido, our hero, my least favorite player on the Mets, for reasons that I probably shouldn't state. But they've been disappointing. I expected the Phillies, 4th place Phillies. As I've been saying, I said in the predictions, they're sitting in last place right now. So isn't that a joy to see? But, the Nationals, I think they've been a little bit disappointing for compared. I expected their rotation to carry. Yeah, I did expect their lineup to struggle. But, Juan Soto, now that he's come back from Corona, he's been going off. I mean, he just lit up the Mets. Of course, it's the Mets. What can you expect? They always give up runs. And, the Mets, I know how you mentioned the Mets as, kind of disappointing. Let's just put it at this. They've stranded the most runners on base this year, and their lineup was supposed to be, kind of strong. So we're just going to leave it at that this year. Another disappointing team, the Pirates, yeah. I mean, the Reds, you can say the Reds, but personally, the Reds bullpen is what's kind of losing them games right now. Nick Castellanos has been going off, like crazy. They've had a few injuries there, but their rotation, again, so dominant. Desclafani, I know he had a terrible start yesterday, but he was crazy good. Bauer, Castillo, Gray, still probably the best rotation in baseball right now, no doubt about it. And then finally, getting to Arizona, I mean, they've been just looked horrendous. I mean, even Zach Gallen, he's a little bit worse than I expect him to be. Did expect him to be a little bit better than what they are. But, their lineup just not clicking. Ketel Marte, I said it during last year, career year, he's not looking anything good. Cole Calhoun, I mean, Starling Marte, he's heating up a bit. But overall, Arizona just hasn't really been putting the pieces together for me. And that's leading them to, another, just disappointing team for me. But like you said, right now, looking at it, I think Boston is the biggest disappointment we've had. So, yeah, I think that's where we're going to put it, end this one here. Playoff teams right now, with the expanded roster, you're going to get 8 teams from each league. So, we mentioned a little bit about it. The teams like the Rockies right now are in it. The Marlins, if the season ended today, are in it. The Orioles are probably a wild card team right now. So the Detroit Tigers are in it right now. So, again, crazy things happening within the expanded postseason. We'll be talking about next week. Hopefully we can get you a show out talking about surprise and disappointing players, along with some other things that happen. Drew, do you want to send them off with some inspiration?
Just keep watching the games. Support Major League Baseball, and stay safe out there. And we'll get you guys another update as soon as possible. We can get back on here. But keep supporting Nick and what he's doing with Undefeated Productions. And again, this is an unprecedented time. So, hopefully we can all get through this and be back in the stands next year. That's our goal.
Yep. Stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.